I'm pressing the go live button now.
Hi everyone, my name is Amy and I am a digital trainer here at EMS. Now today, obviously what I'm going to be talking to you all about is Google Analytics. And as we'll see in today's session, there have been some really important updates when it comes to this incredibly powerful web analytics tool. Now, because of this, what we are going to do is we're actually going to be taking questions at the end of today's live session, if that's okay. Now, if you do have any questions throughout the session at all, just be sure to pop them in the comments below. And if you can use the hashtag EMS growth, that's hashtag EMS growth, chuck any questions you've got in the comments. That'll be absolutely fantastic for us. So if we can just skip ahead now to our session objectives, we're just going to cover quickly what we're going to go through in this wee live video for you, and then we'll get cracking with today's session. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set the scene by just looking at the importance of data collection. And as we're going to see, this is really, really important because you need to be setting objectives for your business so that when it comes to you actually evaluating your data, you have something to look at first and foremost, and then something to actually measure against. Now, don't forget those SMART objectives as well. Those SMART goals are really, really important when it comes into this kind of conversation. So we'll cover that a wee bit as well. The next thing we're going to be taking a look at there is data collection tools and techniques. And this will just be a really wee bit of today's session. We're going to cover two tools in particular. Now, of course, you're probably thinking, why two? We're talking about Google Analytics today. Well, I have got a wee little bit of a stretch and challenge section for you in terms of introducing something called behavior analytics and a new tool in there for you as well. We're then going to dive into the universal analytics world that we already know, hopefully, and again, hopefully, love. And I'm saying hopefully because as we'll see, the next part of the session is then actually introducing a brand new version of Google Analytics. And that's going to be us introducing GA4 or Google Analytics 4. And that's the main focus of most of our session today. It's ensuring, as we'll see for the predominant main focus of the section right toward the end, the new features, the new reports, how you're actually supposed to get started using it. This is something that I've had with regards to conversations with a lot of businesses at the moment. The interface is quite different. I am just going to say it is a little bit daunting for a lot of people. So please do not worry, cut yourself some slack right from the beginning when it comes to using this tool and just really start to wrap your head around the importance and the idea of introducing a data strategy for you and your business. Now, I'm just going to say we are obviously live today. So if you do see my eyes darting around the room, I've got two very, very hardworking people sat in the room with me who are frantically trying to make sure that I'm doing my job properly. So I do apologize in advance, but it is all them doing a fantastic job. So if you want to give them some kudos in the comments below as well, please feel free. So we'll get started then, guys. We'll first of all start with the importance of data collection. Now, hopefully, even though you might not be au fait with collecting data for your business, you understand the importance at least of doing it, whether it's with social media or your email marketing or your web asset, i.e. your website. It's really important we're getting feedback. Now, of course, in order to look at feedback effectively, we need to be setting ourselves objectives. Now, today we don't have a ton of time to go through what these objectives could be, how we can start to approach this, and even things like micro and macro objectives. Well, hopefully, if you want to see that in a future session, leave that in the comments below as well, because that's something that we can start to develop with you. Now, that's therefore the first step. Understand what it is you would like to achieve from this thing. Because today we're talking about Google Analytics, we are of course going to be focusing on your web asset or your website. So what is it you want to see? And we'll of course go through the key metrics when it comes to Google Analytics, the tool itself, so you can start to develop an idea as to what those objectives could be. But ultimately, when it comes to looking at this kind of data, we're trying to understand what kind of experience our users are actually getting through our website. How are they behaving on it? What are they doing there? What's driving them when it comes to them performing some kind of action on the website? Now, this ties into something called conversion rate optimization, or because we love an acronym in digital marketing, CRO. Feel free to immediately forget that because jargon in this world is fantastic. It frustrates all of us. But the idea of the conversion rate is really important. What's a conversion and what's a conversion rate? Effectively, what do you want your audience to do on your website and how often would you like them to do it? This is what we're starting to wrap our heads around when it comes to the idea of effectively analysing and assessing our data. It's no good looking at reports and saying, I had 150 page views or users or sessions today, when actually they might be completely ineffective against what it is you're wanting to do for your business and how people are performing certain actions on your website. So please just bear that in mind. Now, a really good example when it comes to this is the Paperchase website. This is a perfect one for you to turn to when it comes to understanding how to encourage your audience to navigate to particular areas of your website in order to achieve these conversions. Now, I would really encourage you to do it in your own time, because what Paperchase does is, in its main menu structure, it forces their customers down certain avenues on the site. So it's almost a forced navigation. For instance, what you'll be able to see if you visit paperchase.com right now, although I obviously encourage you not to do that now, but after this session, is the first tab in their main menu is a sale tab. Now, obviously, if you're a stationery addict like me, that's cracking news, because we can get notebooks of 30 to 50% discount, and I'm showing up for it. However, what they're effectively saying is, at this point in the year, we understand this is the most important thing to you. If you, like me, unashamedly, are a frequent viewer of the Paperchase website, you'll notice that whenever there's any kind of seasonal update, Mother's Day, Father's Day, Easter, they'll then update that first left tab. Now, why is that? That's because obviously in our country, we tend to read from left to right. So when it comes to a menu, that main menu navigation section, we're equally doing the same thing. We're going to gravitate to the first thing in that top left corner. So what Paperchase is automatically doing is assigning value to that first element of their site. That is one component, one element of their website amongst many, many others. So when it comes to analysing your data, setting objectives, just bear that in mind. There's lots of things you might want to achieve, and they can be really small actions, or they can be much bigger. And that, of course, is where that conversation comes into play of micro and macro conversions. Like I said, maybe for another time, if you're interested, do make sure you're commenting below with that and any other topics that you might be interested in when it comes to us doing some more sessions in the future, which we would actually absolutely love to do with you. Either way, what we're really looking for is your data telling a vivid story about your audience and their experience on your website. Now, again, another acronym, I do apologize. You might have heard of something called UX, and that stands for user experience on your site. And this is sort of a reciprocal relationship. This is where this kind of narrative comes in, because what we really have to understand with your website and the data you're seeing via a tool like Google Analytics isn't just, what do I want to achieve as a business, and is that happening? We also have to understand, but is my audience enjoying their experience there? And that's because when it comes to any kind of asset, let alone your website, others as well, of course, we need to make sure people are developing a positive brand association with us. And generally, that's going to be done via a good experience. Think about when you go into a shop and you have a moody shopkeeper. Fair enough, they might be having a really terrible day, bless them. But if you don't have a good experience, you're probably going to tell someone. Or you're going to think, oh, I don't really want to go in there again because actually it wasn't that fun. Whereas if someone is, like on a reasonable level, jovial and fun and jolly and helps you out, if somebody asks you at the checkout, did you find everything you wanted to? Then you feel like you're supported. Now, that's where your website comes into play again. And that's where your data comes into play again as well, because your data also identifies things called barriers and persuaders for your audience, i.e. things that prevent them from doing what they want to on your website, and things that enable them to perform certain actions on your website. So your data really is working in this two-part dynamic, and you therefore have to think about everything in digital marketing, let alone your website or your web asset, as being this reciprocal relationship when it comes to you and your audience. So this is the kind of mindset I would like us to take forward into moving into data collection. Now, where do you collect this data? Of course, today we're talking about Google Analytics, and very shortly I'll be segueing into, very smoothly obviously, the rest of the session on Google Analytics 4. But I did just want to mention there's also another tool called Hotjar. Now, Google Analytics falls under the title of web analytics, or the topic of web analytics. What we're looking at there is quantitative, raw numerical data, so math stuff, right? We have some graphs and some charts and some numbers and some percentages and figures. That's what we're looking at there. But what this doesn't necessarily do is add context when it comes to our data and what we're actually seeing. Instead, what we can add to that, to add more of a narrative, is something called behavior analytics, and that's under something called Hotjar. So I would encourage you to take a look at that particular tool, because a tool like Hotjar that adds this behavior analytics and this context, this narrative, gives us more of an understanding as to that audience, that user experience when it comes to our website. Now, when we think about how does it all work, Google Analytics works as many data collection tools do. You get a unique snippet of code, you stick it in the header of your website. You don't have to do this yourself. If you've got a website like WordPress, you can get a plugin called Insert Headers and Footers, and that very, very neatly does it for you. You can copy and paste the code in, or you can ask a web developer. Sometimes whoever's hosting your website might also support you with this. Now, why am I saying this? This is because when we discuss GA4 in just a wee second, we'll understand we actually have to create a new property, okay? Now, we're not gonna go through necessarily the hierarchy or the account structure of Google Analytics today, but you're not making a new account in order to use GA4. You use the same account, but you just add a new asset, if you will, a new property. Now, properties in Google Analytics at the moment fall underneath a website or a mobile app. So we're thinking about it with that regard. But what I would encourage you to look into further, like I said, maybe it's a future session. Yet again, I'm not being given these call to actions, but it's another topic we could possibly deliver for you and talk about. Comment below. Using something called Google Tag Manager, it's going to make your life so much easier. It's basically a single hub where you set up all of these snippets of code, what are called tags. And from there, you're actually able then to easily facilitate custom conversions, setting up GA4, setting up Hotjar even on your website at the click of a button. So it's really, really nice and easy for you to do. Now, when it comes to the universal analytics as we know and love, I actually just told them to skip a slide and realized I was on the right one. So I'm doing a terrible job and everyone else is being really good right now. The universal analytics as we know and love, we currently have the report structured like this. So I do just have to make us aware, if you're currently using Google Analytics and the universal version, you'll have a report structure like this. There'll be a real-time, an acquisition, audience behavior, and conversion report. So some really, really lovely, nicely dissected, and quite frankly, easily labeled tabs that allow you to access the data that you want to. This has very much changed when it comes to GA4, and this is what quite a lot of businesses are really struggling with now. If you actually make a brand new Google Analytics account, maybe off the back of today's session, I don't know, then you won't get this. There is a way that you can, and again, feel free, like I said, to comment below with hashtag EMS growth in order to let us know if you would like us to explain how you can access Universal Analytics if you're only just going to be creating a Google Analytics account now. But this is only going to be available immediately, that is, for those of you who already have a Universal Analytics account. So that is worthwhile bearing in mind. I will explain later on in today's session, or toward the end to be honest, that do keep this. Do keep referring back to it. Because as we'll see, the news is that as of July 2023, Universal Analytics accounts will no longer be collecting hits. So this is something that we have to be aware of when it comes to us learning about GA4. Quite frankly, we completely changed this session. So I do apologize if any of you are here today wanting to know how to navigate and utilize Universal Analytics. But this is a really important thing to take into consideration when it comes to you learning about the interface and the reports here. And that's what we're going to go through now, the basic setup when it comes to that. So GA4 is of course the newest solution. It's the largest change in a decade when it comes to Google Analytics as a web analytics tool and any kind of editing and changing to do with the interface. Please do not worry if it's really quite challenging for you to get your teeth into this. Something that I will say is, supposedly, it's meant to be easier. I'm going to say it's mostly easier for marketers. For businesses trying to access content on a daily basis, it is slightly more challenging. But we're going to go through the basic changes right now and take a look at it. So the first change that we've got is data structure and collection logic. So if we can skip through to the next slide, Chick. Basically, what we're thinking about when it comes to this is that the way that GA4 collects data and processes it is slightly different to Universal Analytics. For those of us who currently use Universal, we'll be aware that it basically collects things in sessions. Now, a session is just a collection of events. So I navigate to a website, it fires the tracking code and starts a session. That session lasts as long as I'm on the site or until there's 30 minutes of inactivity on the site if you're like me and you keep countless tabs open on your computer because you're online shopping and don't want to actually spend the money, then that's inactivity. And we obviously don't want to collect that data, right? Because it's pointless and meaningless for businesses. So Google does that and that's fantastic. But from a marketing perspective, it's actually slightly not as useful as it could be. Because that's not all we want to know on our website, right? We also want to track events, and that's where GA4 comes in. Now, GA4 revolves around users and events, individual people, their individual journey through your site, and all of the events that they actually perform on your website, okay? Now, when it comes to us thinking about this, we sort of think, this feels quite jarring. It's suddenly very different. It is. And this is what I really want to bring home today in terms of you spending some time, committing some time over the next, we've got over a year, guys, so we should be fine, right? When it comes to committing some time to learning about this, it's actually a really advantageous update because we're able to identify those barriers and persuaders that I talked about earlier far easier using GA4's reporting structure than we were able to do via Universal Analytics. It's far less clunky. It's just about wrapping our heads around it. The second major change when it comes to GA4 are events. Now, like I said, events and or sessions are triggered when somebody starts their journey on your website. Okay, so think about that, landing on a web page, then what happens? Now, when it comes to GA4, what events are we actually looking at? And you will excuse me whilst I have a wee scroll through some notes I've got here, just so we can go through these in a little bit more detail. If we can skip back one, please, Cherub, that'd be fun. Fantastic, okie dokie. So when it comes to events, these are the ones that we're actually looking at. So with regard to page views, what we're looking at is, as it was with Universal, every single time the web page loads, that's a page view. This is an automatic event. We can't turn this off. Something that is important and quite exciting really to note when it comes to GA4 is you can actually create custom events and you can set up these what are known as parameters. Using Google Tag Manager is far easier to facilitate this for you, but you can also do it internally via your GA4 interface. This is something, like I said, you can't turn off, but you are able to add additional events should you wish to. Scrolls are the next one. This is where it gets exciting. This is where Universal Analytics and GA4 are really quite separate from one another. Scrolls actually start to fire as events, and you get this in your reporting data when a user reaches the bottom of a page. Now, many of you might think that's really not that overwhelming because surely people navigate to the bottom of the page all the time. They really don't, especially if you start to introduce yourself to the behavior analytics tools like Hotjar. Microsoft Clarity is also an option for you there. You'll start to understand something called the average fold. And that's on average, how far does somebody scroll down your web page? It's really not that far. So if you're putting a call to action, like an email sign up in the footer of your web page, and if it's in the footer, it's replicated across every single piece of content on your site. Very, very few people are ever navigating that far down your page. So this scroll data is actually really supportive with this and pairing it with that little extra detail when it comes to a tool like Hotjar. We've then got outbound links. Now, many of you might think, A, what is that? And B, why is it important? Well, in terms of what it is, we're thinking about somebody clicking on a link, be it anchor text or a button, and navigating away from your website. In and of itself, that's obviously not necessarily that important, but if you have things like affiliate links, Bob's your uncle, it's really, really helpful for us understanding what's actually happening on our site and who's interacting with what. Site search, if you've got an e-commerce website or if you've got a search function on your website, you immediately start to collect data via that and the queries that people are inputting. These were all things that you had to manually set up previously in Universal Analytics. So I appreciate it might not feel that exciting yet, but this is all the stuff that's already provided for you with GA4. We've also got things like video engagement. We obviously have a lot of video content. You might have embedded videos as well. And what we actually get within this is we get a video start event. So if somebody's clicking play, we start to get data. B, we then have 10%, 25%, 50%, and 75% view time, and then an entirely separate report again for complete views. So we all know, right, that in social media, across different platforms, video is incredibly important. So if we're starting to create really valuable content, why not also embed that content on our website? And we can continue to assess the data and even compare it. Is it more or less effective with regards to our viewers when it's on our social media platforms or on our website? It would be quite interesting to compare the two. And finally, we have file downloads as well. Okay, now file downloads can be documents, PDFs, text, audio, compressed files, anything like that. But like I said, these events are automatically set up when it comes to GA4 as you create it there. So when it comes to this, we're thinking about how is it actually going to help with your data collection? So if we move on to the next one for me, darling, and the next one after that. The first thing we're thinking about here is enhanced machine learning, okay? So what we're really thinking about is, especially with things like the new Apple updates, I appreciate for many of us, we might have heard some things about them, maybe incorrect data from a lot of businesses that I tend to speak to. What we do know is that privacy is really continuing to be quite a strong factor, a barrier really for some businesses and some marketers when it comes to accumulating effective data for ourselves. The really good thing for us is, of course, when it comes to Google Analytics, all the data is not personally identifiable information. There's no PII, if you actually enjoy an acronym, involved in this kind of stuff. But what GA4 does provide us with, competing or really supporting us against this privacy implementation, if you want to think about it that way, is a really exciting path exploration. So we actually get to identify, you might have looked at this as a user flow report under your behavior tab in the current universal analytics. We get to identify how single users, as I mentioned earlier, actually navigate through each different piece of content on our site, how they interact with it, how long they're spending there, and therefore understanding those barriers and those persuaders, again, is going to be really, really important for us. The second main feature that we're really looking at here is supposedly, I really don't think it is, a simplified interface. If I'm being entirely honest with you, what they basically say is it's really easy to find irregularities. If you don't normally, or if you're used to universal, that's not true. I don't find it's true. None of the businesses that I've spoken to have found this particularly to be true. You basically go into the tool and think, where on earth do I begin? It's like I said, it does warrant some time fumbling around, but once we do get to grips with it, supposedly it's going to be much, much easier for us to identify irregularities as a consequence of customer reports and things that we can create. Now, the final thing we're going to do today, just so you're aware, we are going to wrap up in a few minutes for you there, is we're just going to look at some essential reports, okay? Just so we're aware of what we're going into when it comes to GA4 and what we can be looking at here. Because like I said, there are those 5 main reports with Universal. This one is a tad bit different. So the first thing that we've got here is the homepage report. Now this probably looks a little bit familiar if you've used Universal, right? You land on the homepage and you basically get an overview of everything that's going on your site, including things like real-time traffic, but we'll come to that in just a wee second. Now, this quickly answers for you a few things. Where are the users coming from, for instance? What are your top performing campaigns or even pieces of content? And of course, let's say for instance that we take these videos, we embed them in a piece of content on our website. That's the thing that we are currently, assigning as an objective for our web content. So that's going to be really supportive and really helpful for you. If of course you are looking at promoting a new line of products or services that you're trying to really push and sell, then again, you can easily identify those via the homepage reports. So kudos with regards to GA4 supplying us with that. And finally, like I've sort of said, supporting this, we start to identify the pieces of content that are receiving the most views. Now, think about things, like I said, with regards to blogging or even looking at the customer funnel and your customers or individual users navigating through that funnel to eventually convert with you as a business. This is going to give us a really key understanding as to the kind of time frame, the expectation that we have of our existing website and how quickly or effectively and efficiently we can get our users to go from considering our business to actually conversing with us. The next report we can look at, as I mentioned there, is the real-time report. And again, this is something we do have in Universal Analytics. So there is some crossover, and that's because this is actually really, really useful. It is a default report, okay? So like the homepage, it is automatically there for you. And what it does is it shows events that happened in the last 30 minutes. Now, What is this going to answer for us? Well, A, quick answer. It's going to confirm the tracking code is actually working. And B, it's actually going to show us if, for instance, we have a new product drop happening on our website, and if, for instance, you've got sort of an early bird deal via an email campaign, we can start to see the activity trickle through from something like that marketing campaign to our site in real time. I tend to find for most businesses this is slightly gimmicky with regards to regular usage of the real-time report, but if you are launching certain things, like I've said, or if you are just assessing whether the tracking code is working, it can be quite helpful for you. The next report we're going to be taking a look at here is the lifecycle reporting. This is where we see a big divergence between Universal and GA4. And that's because the lifecycle reports, and I'm saying numerous reports there, are actually identifying things like the acquisition, the engagement, the monetization, and the retention of customers on your website. And this is something that a lot of people do find really quite unnerving when it comes to looking at GA for the first time. There's a tab called monetizing or monetization, and they think, what's happening? Am I a creator now, or am I a vlogger? I don't understand, because we don't necessarily associate web analytics with that kind of language. But what this is actually doing, the quick answers that we're really getting here, is understanding how do users enter the conversion funnel and how do they behave once they're actually there. So these, yet again, are really, really supportive reports for us, and yet again, they're default when it comes to GA4. So actually, it's not a clunky update. It's very, very effective, slightly more technical, but really, really supportive when it comes to these reports. And finally, the Explore reports. And now what I have tended to find with some businesses talking about GA4 is, I can't create reports in the way that I want to. I can't customize them. How do I start to apply segments? And therefore, how do I start to filter through my data in the way that I can with Universal Analytics? That's where these come in. There's a tab on the left-hand side called Explore. What it will do is it will open up this. This is known as the new analysis hub. This is insanely exciting, but I will have a little caveat here. It's exciting if you know how you want to segment your data, how you want to view and analyze your data, i.e. in what form. We have path exploration, which we kind of covered there. Think about freeform. We've got charts and tables that hopefully we're okay with slightly, but there are loads of other templates, or a handful of other templates that we can look at, or even a blank exploration that you can start to identify and create for yourself as well. If you don't know about Google Analytics' dimensions and metrics, we're probably going to want to when it comes to starting to utilize this. So yet again, there might be some extra stuff that you want to know. Feel free to drop in the comments if you want us to go through those. Or alternatively, Google has got a ton. I don't want to be mean to Facebook, but not a lot of their documentation is up to date or always helpful, whereas Google's is. So it's genuinely nice for you to take a look at. So do look at their documentation when it comes to this kind of stuff. It might be technical, that's fine. We'll work our way through it. There are plenty of awesome tutorials that we can create, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, or that are available for you to access immediately online. So please do have a look. Now, when it comes to this is obviously ensuring that we can create really targeted custom reports for ourselves. Now, just to wrap up today's session, because I appreciate I might have gone on slightly longer than the previous session, but thank you for holding in there with me. There's quite a lot to take in. GA4 is very different to Universal. It's really exciting. It's slightly terrifying. How are we supposed to feel about this? It feels like 2021 all over again, right? But what we're really looking at is a fantastic new way for us to interpret data, to create custom reports for ourselves that are really, very much more effective when it comes to tracking the events that we need to track according to our marketing objectives. So I do want you to be excited, and I do want you also to be excited about the idea of actually exploring data collection a bit more and data analysis. This is something, though, that I do want us to be aware of. Don't forget, Universal isn't going anywhere until July 2023. So we've got a wee bit of time. As I mentioned, if you want to learn more about the idea of getting a Google Analytics account set up, starting to collect data now, and then learning as we go through, please do that. It's really important you don't wait until you're ready, so to speak, and then create an account. The accumulation of data ahead of time is going to be really important. And the machine learning, the enhanced machine learning we talked about earlier, needs to spend some time understanding how your audience is using your website in order to deliver really effective reports for you and your business via GA4. So the earlier, whether you have Universal Analytics now or not, you can get set up with GA4, the better. If you have got Universal, please don't worry. Like I said, it adds it as a new property. So GA4 is a new property. If you create a GA4 property, it will not override Universal. So what we call dual tagging is actually preferable at the moment. It means that you have two separate collection points of data when it comes to your website and how your audience is actually behaving there. And you can refer to both of them whilst sitting with a lovely, we're all familiar with Universal for the most part, whilst we're learning as well about GA4. So there's no hurry, there's no need to panic, there's just excitement, hopefully. Yes, it is Tuesday, I appreciate, but be excited. When it comes to data collection, it's a 4-day week. Like, come on, it's Easter weekend this weekend, so we can be excited, okay? So with regards to that, thank you very much for watching our second and last live of the day. Of course, we were talking about Google Analytics for your business. Any questions, please be sure to drop them in the comments below with hashtag replay, okay? And we'll get back to you with regard to answering those as quickly as possible. We're not taking any questions following this live. What we say is we never compete with food as trainers, and we know it's nearly lunchtime, so we're just not gonna do that for you. But do make sure you're asking any questions for us in the comments below, and we'll have those answered for you as quickly as possible. But have a fab Easter weekend.
Did you know we've launched a new course called The Design Factory? You will learn practical techniques to use on your website to convert more visitors into customers. Head to enterprisemadesimple.co.uk/design-factory to find out more.